I called President Trump and told him I wanted to be here myself to call out what is a travesty of justice. They are doing this intentionally to keep him here and keep him off of the campaign trail. I am disgusted by what is happening here, what is being done here to our entire system of justice overall. They're using this trial as a hook. It's so corrupt, and everybody knows it. If Alvin Bragg thinks the American people will believe these absurd charges, take a look at the turnout at Trump events. Compare those to Biden events, by the way, but he had over 100,000 people in New Jersey. By some estimates, far more than that, because the lineup of people getting into the event was thousands deep as well.
Speaker Mike Johnson is slamming the criminal case against Donald Trump in New York, becoming the highest-ranking lawmaker to rally for the former president outside the courthouse. While the court case continues to play out, new polling from the New York Times shows Trump is leading President Biden in 5 out of 6 crucial battleground states, damaging numbers for the Biden team that only has the president ahead in Wisconsin. Joining us now is The Hill's Brett Samuels. Brett, thanks for being here. Why is Trump resonating with voters more than Biden in some of these swing states?
Yeah, like you said, it's certainly not welcome news for the Biden campaign that they felt like they had some momentum going in the polls. And then this New York Times survey comes out and shows that not only are they trailing former President Trump in 5 out of these 6 battleground states, but in places like Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, they're trailing Trump really pretty handily. So they certainly have some ground to make up there. And at the end of the day, what this poll shows is that voters who should be sort of Biden's bread and butter, the voters that make up his coalition, that's young voters, Black voters, Hispanic voters, they're really sort of skeptical of President Biden, particularly over his handling of the war in Gaza and sort of the needle he's tried to thread there as far as support for Israel. And there's also some trepidation about the state of the economy, where even as there is good economic data, people just don't feel that. And they see high prices, they see inflation remaining kind of stubbornly high, and they hold Biden responsible for that. So Biden certainly has some work to do, not just winning over swing voters, but persuading the voters who put him in office in 2020.
Brett, turning to Trump and his hush money trial, Michael Cohen is on the stand once again. Has Cohen's testimony helped the prosecution's case?
Yeah, so going into Michael Cohen's testimony, he was considered sort of the star witness for the prosecution. A lot riding on him, which, folks sort of on all parts of the political spectrum saw as sort of an interesting framing, just given sort of his history and his loyalty to Trump in the past and his own guilty plea. But that said, he has sort of been the key cog for the prosecution's case. He has been the witness who has been able to testify about Trump being in the room with attorneys, being in the room with officials as they wrote checks, as they signed off on memorandums and documents. So really, Michael Cohen is the one who is trying to testify to jurors here that Trump was in the room, that he was aware of these hush money payments. And that, at the end of the day, is really central to the prosecution's case. So, attacks on Michael Cohen's credibility aside, he really has turned out to be sort of the central, most important witness that the prosecution has brought here.
Republicans are flocking to New York in support of Trump, the latest Mike Johnson. What's their angle here?
So for different lawmakers, I think it's sort of a different motivation, but it is certainly interesting to see this New York courthouse becoming kind of the latest hotspot for Republican lawmakers looking to show that they're loyal to Trump. For someone like Mike Johnson, it's particularly interesting. He's going as the Speaker of the House. He's facing criticism from Democrats in particular over this idea that, he's, second in line to the presidency, and he's outside a courthouse weighing in on an active criminal case. But at the same time, Trump sort of stepped in to try and help Mike Johnson as he faced a threat to his speakership just last week. So for Mike Johnson, it's certainly in his interest to remain loyal to Trump, to make sure that he has a strong relationship with Trump. For some of these other lawmakers we've seen, like Senator J.D. Vance, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, those are prime contenders to be Trump's running mate in November. So certainly there's this idea that if they show up, if they once again reiterate their loyalty to Trump, then maybe they'll be rewarded down the line. So certainly at the end of the day, loyalty is sort of the name of the game here for these folks who want to be seen standing behind Trump in court.
Brett, Republicans are also focused on the conflict in the Middle East, while the Israeli military has continued its push into central Gaza, and a UN staff member was killed in a recent attack in the southern part of the city. How will this add more of a strain to the already tense relationship between Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Yeah, this is something worth watching closely, I think. Certainly, the Biden administration, President Biden just recently in an interview said that if Israel launched a full-fledged invasion of Rafah, he would withhold certain types of offensive shipments of artillery and bombs and weapons to Israel. That, of course, has upset Republicans who feel that there should be no limits on the U.S. support for Israel. There's even a House bill that is coming up for a vote where House lawmakers are trying to essentially force Biden's hand here to ensure that he'll send aid to Israel. But certainly, Israel is not backing down here. As you said, they're going further into Gaza. The White House has so far signaled that this doesn't equate to a full-scale invasion of the scope and size and duration that they've warned against. But Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has certainly shown no concerns about restraint or about appeasing Biden and sort of his wishes. So certainly, the farther he goes, the more pressure there will be on the White House to back up its words about restraining aid to Israel.
Another trial going on, the corruption trial of Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, who is facing 16 criminal charges, including bribery and fraud. He still hints at a possible independent run. How is that scenario sitting with Democrats right now?
Not well, to put it plainly. Bob Menendez, certainly as he's facing these criminal charges, has sort of fallen out of favor with a lot of Democrats. Now, some of them have sort of withheld judgment or calls for him to resign until this trial takes place. But you have other folks like John Fetterman in the Senate who has really not held back, has really attacked Senator Menendez. And other lawmakers have really rallied behind Andy Kim, this congressman in New Jersey who's running for Menendez's seat in New Jersey in the Senate. So people seem to be rallying behind Andy Kim. They seem to feel good about him as a candidate for the Democratic Party. And I think, even as some Democratic senators in particular are careful about what they say about their current colleague, Bob Menendez, I think there is a desire amongst a lot of Democrats to just kind of turn the page and really rally behind Andy Kim, who they feel is a strong candidate here.
Brett, over in Arizona, the Supreme Court granted a delay of the state's 1864 abortion ban, meaning it won't take effect for the next several months, if at all. How does that impact some of the close November races in that state?
Yeah, Arizona, obviously the Senate race is going to be very closely watched between Carrie Lake and Ruben Gallego. Abortion is going to be a big deal for that race. We've already seen, in the wake of that initial Supreme Court ruling in Arizona upholding this 1864 law, that Carrie Lake was really put on the defensive to just sort of try and justify that ruling and tiptoe around it in some ways. And Ruben Gallego certainly used it to his advantage to go on the attack, to raise money, et cetera. And in the presidential race, obviously, Arizona is going to be a hotly contested battleground. So even though this ruling may be delayed as far as the enforcement of it, I don't think it will lessen the impact of abortion and the way that Democrats in particular try to use abortion as an issue against Republicans. Clearly, it's been a big motivator for Democratic voters dating back to when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. So despite this delay in Arizona of this abortion ruling, I suspect we'll still hear Democrats, Ruben Gallego and others, continue to talk about it.
Brett, it's primary day in Maryland and West Virginia, and the outcome could have major implications for control of the Senate this fall. How worried are Democrats about defending the historically reliably blue state of Maryland?
Yeah, Maryland has been an interesting Democratic primary in that Senate race between David Trone and Angela Alsobrooks. Very competitive, a lot of money spent. And as you said, there is this sort of sneaking feeling that Maryland could actually be pretty competitive in the general election with Larry Hogan, the former governor, running as a Republican candidate for that Senate seat. Democrats, I think they're not super concerned yet about Maryland flipping red toward Larry Hogan. Obviously, he's a stronger candidate than maybe they put up in the past. He has great name recognition, being the former governor. But Maryland is really a pretty reliably blue state as far as the Senate races go. Now, the concern, I think, would be that, Democrats will have to spend some money in Maryland. They'll have to put some resources into that race that maybe they would rather be putting toward Montana or Arizona or some of those more competitive races that they're defending. But certainly, Maryland's going to be a little more competitive than usual, even if Democrats are still able to defend their turf there.
Brett, another tough Senate race for Democrats is in West Virginia. What are the chances Republicans can flip the state now that Senator Manchin is stepping aside? Yeah,
this is one that is, as good a bet as any to flip in November. Joe Manchin had, he managed to work his magic in West Virginia for several cycles. He was sort of the last of his kind, this red state Democrat. And really, he seemed to be the only Democrat who was able to win statewide in West Virginia. So with his retirement, I think Democrats have made peace with the idea that this Senate seat is going to flip to Republicans. Former Governor Justice, I should say, of West Virginia, is looking like the likely replacement for Joe Manchin. So, this just puts more pressure on Democrats to defend seats like Montana with John Tester, to win that Senate seat in Arizona with Ruben Gallego. Certainly, Democrats are not banking on this West Virginia seat staying in their columns. So it just kind of applies pressure elsewhere on the map for them in what is a pretty tough election cycle in the Senate.
The Hill's Brett Samuels, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
A bus carrying farm workers in Central Florida overturned Tuesday morning, killing at least 8 people and injuring about 40 others. The bus was transporting more than 50 farm workers when it collided with a truck in Marion County, which is north of Orlando. Officials say the bus swerved off the road and then crashed through a fence before ending up on its side in a field. The workers were on their way to a nearby farm known for harvesting watermelons. The Florida Highway Patrol is now investigating the incident.
We're not going to let China flood our market, making it impossible for American auto manufacturers to compete fairly. We're also implementing a 25% tariff on electric vehicle batteries from China and a 25% tariff on critical minerals that make those batteries.
The Biden administration announces a plan to increase tariffs on a long list of Chinese-made products. On that list are electric vehicles, advanced batteries, solar cells, steel, aluminum, and medical equipment. Administration officials say they don't expect the tariff hike to escalate tensions, but did say they expect China to explore ways to respond. The tariffs are expected to be phased in over the next 3 years. 6 major airlines filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration over a new rule requiring carriers to disclose all fees up front for things like checked bags and carry-ons, even changing or canceling reservations. The new rule is just the latest move in the Biden administration's crackdown on junk fees. The Department of Transportation said last month that it could save travelers $500 million per year.
Unsurprisingly, airlines are not enthusiastic about us holding them to a higher standard. But I believe that this is in the interest of the airline sector because it builds passengers' confidence in airlines as a whole.
The airlines are calling the new rule an overreach and argue it will confuse customers. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Margaret Chadbourn. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.